Yeah, so we're back in western Wisconsin, and it is early ice. We're with Ryan again from the Ice Junkies crew, and it's just a neat area. A lot of different panfish opportunities. We're going to be targeting crappies here in this particular body of water, but you know, this is the thing. You can see through the ice. I mean, it's probably 4 or 5 inches of ice, so it's safe to walk out here. But probably the biggest thing is these fish can be a little spooky. And so ripped a bunch of holes through here. Now we're just going to let things settle down. And I think probably the big thing is just getting a little bit more methodical this time of year, where you walk up to a hole, drop your transducer down, give a little bit of time for these fish to come underneath you. I think sometimes we can get too aggressive this time of year and just keep spooking fish. When you only have 4 inches of clear ice, you can definitely move these fish around, especially walk around with cleats on your boots. Slow down and let the fish come back around.
We're out here in northern Wisconsin today. We're on a very small lake that's full of big fish. We're actually gonna set up out here. We're gonna start drilling our holes first, let it settle down since it's such a small lake, and get after it. Wow, look at the colors on that fish. Just beautiful. Look at the build. Northwest Wisconsin is famous for these pothole lakes. And don't get me wrong, we have our fair share of the 500-600 acre lakes that offer, very good fishing. But these little 30-40 acre lakes, these little potholes, hold some tremendous pan fishing. And a lot of the time, most of the time, you're gonna be the only ones out here getting them. So a lot of times with these little pothole lakes, there's very little structure and weed cover. It's mostly a mud or silt bottom. So if we're hole hopping here and we're not getting anything on the Vexilar, it's imperative drop all the way down to the bottom, and a clam drop kick or a pinhead minnow is a real good bait to do this with. Drop it all the way to the bottom, pound the bottom, stir that silt up, and it'll draw those curious fish in.
Oh, gotta love it when they race up 2 or 3 feet. There's a nice crappie. And that's what we're looking for. Probably a pretty good representation of what you'd hope to find for a crappie, and what you'd hope to find for crappies here in western Wisconsin. But it'd be just a great eating fish, and what a fun fish. When they just streak up like that, I love that type of a bite. I've got a smaller size drop jig with just a Maki, kind of a dark color, kind of more of a finessey presentation with 2-pound test. And I've got that bigger Neku bolt minnow on the other rod. I've got 3-pound test on that, but just kind of going back and forth. I find that you get them wound up, go with the big stuff. Sometimes you got to get them started though. So I've been kind of going back and forth. Wear out your welcome on one, just throw down to the other. And typically when I'm running 2 rods like this, I like to have different profiles. One finesse profile, one more of a bigger power fishing profile, and then one bright, one dark. Just kind of go back and forth in the color spectrum as well. But when they're really biting, it don't matter. A lot of times you got to almost get them to bite. Get them to open up a little bit. Get them started. Once one bites, the rest of them are a lot easier. From what I remember, going back to some of the earlier days, it seemed like the soft plastic phenomenon came from the East, in the sense that when we first went to some of the earliest sports shows or ice fishing shows out in Michigan, upstate New York, and we ran into so many people. And then obviously Wisconsin, especially down that Madison area, down to Milwaukee, into Chicago, there was just a triangle through there where there's a lot of people were using soft plastics way ahead of the curve, long before most people in the country were using them, at least from what we saw. And so that's where we first started encountering some of this stuff. I remember going to sports shows in New York, and there'd be just aquariums set up, and there'd be all kinds of different plastics hooked up on jigs where you could just, pick up a little ice fishing rod and quiver it in a fish tank to see what the action looked like. And some of the stuff was really precise as far as the profiles, the actions, imitating a specific insect. And from there, then, it just kind of spread over the last 20 years where it seems like, plastics are, it doesn't matter if you're on a reservoir in eastern Montana, if you're in the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, it just doesn't matter. If you're fishing for panfish, if you're fishing for crappies in particular, it's probably something you better keep an eye on, or, something to have confidence in because they can be so effective.
Oh, what a tank. That is what we're after. The old clam epoxy drop and the Neku boat minnow. Beautiful fish. This is what Northwest Wisconsin is all about right here. All right, let's get this big girl back here, huh? What a fish. So we had a little bit of a slowdown here in our bite, and we're fishing relatively shallow water, 13 feet right now. So what I did, the great thing about using the Vexilar FLX30 is all the different power mode options. And I was noticing these fish coming up, racing up to the bait, and then peacing out, getting out of there. So I switched to low power mode, and voila, look what we got.
There we go. That fish has got some muscle. Let's see what we got here. Oh, look at that. Ah! That is a Wisconsin crappie. Jig popped right over. Look at that fish. That's gorgeous. Just love that yellow tint. That is a tall, beautiful fish. You look at that. I mean, look at the mouth. I mean, when these fish want to eat, I mean, crappies are a predator, and I think sometimes we can definitely underappreciate these fish for being the predator that they can be. Look at that. That's a big... That's a big crappie. I caught a bass earlier, and I was kind of, that was in the back of my mind thinking, another largemouth. And gotta love crappies that you think are bass when they come in and when they're fighting. But that's kind of the program, We're just roaming around. I mean, it's nice enough when you fish outside. The way I look at it is, if you're mad at the fish, I feel like day in and day out, I mean, you're going to probably catch a few more fish if you can just go from hole to hole. And so it's kind of a deal where we've got holes spaced apart, maybe 50, 20 feet or so. And it's just a deal where you'll see it. You'll wear out your welcome. You'll drop down, maybe catch a fish or two. You'll mark some fish, and the fish that are left just keep getting tougher and tougher. Shuffle over to the next hole, let things settle down. Maybe 5 minutes or so, you'll start to mark a fish, catch a few, wear it out, and you just keep going to the next hole. We're just creeping along here, and it's working pretty well. But that was a nice crappie there. In my opinion, soft plastics and crappies, it's just something that goes together. But the thing about soft plastics, if you've never used soft plastics, you don't have confidence in soft plastics, think of it as a game of keep away, in the sense that you've always have to be getting that fish to chase it. You never completely stop moving, at least for very long. You might just pause it for just a short amount of time, but you're just quivering and moving that plastic all the time. And basically you're trying to excite the predator. And I think if there's one thing that we completely underestimate at times, it's crappies. They can be a predator in the sense that they're chasing minnows around, they're chasing invertebrates, but these fish, they rule the roost, okay? They open up that big old mouth. I mean, these big crappies are predators, make no mistake about it. And so that's why soft plastics can work so well for catching these fish. There we go. That one needed a little coaxing, but just a great slab. I think one of the things I enjoy about plastics too is you kind of get to see what these crappies are capable of as far as just being a predator. Yeah, nothing wrong with that right there. That is good stuff. All right.
So I think when it comes to fishing plastics, it's very important to dial in your cadence.
I agree.
It's very easy to over aggressive jig and spook those fish away. It's very important to line everything up. Your whole system has to be perfect, from the line to the rod to the jig to the way you're presenting that bait. You want to try to present it in the most natural form.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, something to point out, you know, if you don't have confidence with plastics, what I like to do is I like to be pretty aggressive when I'm not seeing fish. When I don't have fish right below me, I'm really pounding and just giving that jig a really hard cadence. Just my thought process just to pull those fish in. Once you get fish that come in on it, and a lot of times a lot less is more in the sense you're just doing just a really delicate quiver just to get that body just to flutter, just to take the spin off the jig. Because if you do nothing, then your jig starts to turn and spin. And so the game is, it's almost like climbing a ladder, rungs on a ladder. Fish, say you're right here and the fish comes here, you just keep trying to get that fish to chase.
Yeah, it's a cat and mouse game.
Absolutely, cat and mouse game. Get that fish to chase, but think of it as like rungs on a ladder. You know, it might be 6 inches, it might be a foot. Then the other thing is see what the ceiling is of these fish, in the sense that if fish will only rise 6 inches, 4 inches, those fish are going to be a lot harder to catch, and the fish will come up 2, 3, 4 feet or more.
Once you dial the system in, you know, you start building your confidence each time out, and confidence is everything when fishing plastics.
You know, when you're using soft plastics, in my opinion, it's just ideal to pair these plastics up with tungsten. The reason being is that tungsten fish is heavier. It's like it adds movement to the plastic in the sense that it drops faster, it drops harder. And so when you get that quiver, you just get more dance on that tail. And so a lot of times the plastic itself and the tungsten head itself, it might not necessarily be a finesse presentation in the sense so you can downsize, you can go more subtle, but you're moving water. Make no mistake, when you're quivering that tungsten jig, that's moving water. You're getting displacement, and also you're getting that action on the tail. And so it's a great lure to pull fish into you, and it's a great lure to get fish to rise up in the water column. And typically, as a rule of thumb with these crappies, the higher you can get these fish to climb in the water column, the more aggressive they get. If you can get these fish to climb 3, 4, 5, 6 feet in the water column, usually if you can get them that much higher, you're going to catch them. There we go. Haha. Some of these fish are biting a little light, but they all count the same. Look at that fish dig. They get so strong. What do we got here? Oh yeah, look at that. That is a fish. Beautiful fish. Just love it when they pull out drags on these spooler reels. And these fish seem to be getting a little bit more aggressive here as the days progressed. Yeah, gorgeous fish. Let that fish go. Lucky day for that fish, but this is the program, and so I always joke with fishing, you never say always, you never say never, but one thing that I like to do, you know, these soft plastics like the Maki, they're very soft. They've just got a very undulating action, and they've, you know, a lot of these profiles, you know, they've got tentacles on where they're really bug-like. You know, you almost think of it as an invertebrate. And so when I'm working these particular types of plastics, I like to do a lot of quivering where I just want those tentacles to dance, okay? Think of it as you're trying to be an insect, whether it's a back swimmer, freshwater shrimp, but you just want to undulate in the water. Now, you look at the Neku plastics, they're a little bit more durable, they're a little stiffer. And as a rule of thumb, you're going to have a lot bigger profiles. And so what I like to do with these bigger minnow-shaped profiles is I like to swim them more. So it's not so much as a pulsating quiver, but more of just a stroke where you're just popping it and you're just getting that jig to swim. And the other thing with these types of plastics, with that bigger profile, I like to slide my knot back towards the hook, and it seems like it causes that jig to swim. And so, you know, we've caught fish on both today. I would say so far, it's definitely been a deal where these fish have needed just a little bit more finesse. And so we've been using just the old school Maki. But as the sun gets lower, these fish might open up. And so, every day is different. But I guess the thing I want to stress with this is that there's a lot of ways you can fish soft plastics. Don't get locked down in just one way is the only way. Get comfortable and confident with these soft plastic options. There's no doubt in my mind that these can help you catch a lot more crappies this winter.
So one of the things that made me really want to become a lifelong resident of the state of Wisconsin is its abundance of water. Whether you're after walleyes, you like setting tip-ups for pike, or chasing big panfish, we have large bodies of water, 1,000-acre lakes, and we have these 40-acre lakes. Don't be afraid to step outside the box. Study your maps, look at your aerial views, especially Google Maps. And some of these pothole lakes don't actually show contours, but are loaded with fish. You just have to go try. And if a guy's willing to put in some sweat equity, make the long walks back, drill a couple holes, give it a couple hours, you'd be surprised what you can find out here. And another good thing about these smaller lakes is they're some of the first lakes that lock up first ice. There's still open water throughout half the state. Well, these smaller lakes are locked up and offer a great opportunity to get out, scratch that itch, and put some slabs on the ice.
These are just gorgeous fish. And, it's kind of clear water. I think those clouds that we've had today have probably helped us. We just look at the colors on these fish. These are just beautiful fish. Beautiful fish. And what's interesting is that there's a lot of hybrid sunfish in here that are, I guess you call them stunted. I mean, they're just small. And I think this is just a perfect situation where use plastics. You can kind of just weed out some of those small fish. When you're looking at these plastics for panfish, particularly for crappies, think of it as like a crankbait for walleyes, okay? And just like a crankbait, these are gonna be seen and heard and felt from a little bit further away. You can fish through water a little bit faster with soft plastics. But the other thing too, this is really important. When you hook this bait up, make sure that you're perfectly symmetrical with the body so it hangs straight. You don't want it one side or the other. Your knot placement. A lot of times I'm using a Palomar knot. I want that knot to be right perfectly in the middle of the eyelet. Now you can lean forward one way or the other. You can cock this down or up as far as how the tail is on the hook. You can slide this knot forward and backward, but the biggest thing is left to right. When you're looking down at this jig, it's got to be perfectly symmetrical. Just like a crankbait has to be tuned, these soft plastics have to be tuned. Okay, think of it that way. When you're jigging these baits aggressively, if this bait kicks off to one side, you want it to kick back to the other side, just like the pendulum on a clock. You want to be perfectly balanced. If it's out of tune or uneven or crooked, you're just going to see that jig just spinning off to one side, and it's going to twist up your line, and it doesn't look as good to the fish. You're not going to get bit as much. And so just really something important to pay attention to when you're using soft plastics on these tungsten jigs. One thing that I really find intriguing about this part of the world, it's just there's so much water, way more water. There's so many flowages, there's rivers, there's small lakes, and there are so many opportunities for panfish in particular, ice fishing opportunities. And some of this water can be so unassuming. I mean, we walked down a logging trail to get to this lake. I mean, if you're willing to put in the work, especially, some of this water that's on public land where you can, just drag a sled or carry your gear for a while because there's no accesses or boat ramps in some of these lakes. If you put in the work and find some of these gems, it is worthwhile because these are some special fisheries. And, there's no lake map. There's, not a lot of information even on these lakes. But if you were to just look and study some of these lakes around some of this public ground especially, it's impressive how much water there is. And it's impressive how a lot of these spots just don't ever get fished. Oh. This is a good fish. Oh yeah, I can see it through the ice. That's a big crappie. Oh. Oh, look at that. You can't even see that jig in there. Way down in the throat. Get her out. Look at that. Very impressive. This is just a neat part of the world, you know, these lakes. I mean, there's so many bodies of water. Oh. So many bodies of water in this part of the world where you can target panfish. If you love to ice fish, if you love crappies, you know, you can't really go wrong with western Wisconsin. And if you're looking to specifically target crappies, I don't think you can go wrong with these soft plastics paired up with these tungsten jigs. That's just crappie 101. Stuff catches a lot of fish. And it's just a deal where it's all about efficiencies. Yeah, you'll catch fish on live bait. That's not the point. The reality is, on one of these tails, you know, you might catch a dozen fish, you might catch 6 fish, but you're not rebaiting as often. You have a profile that these fish can see and feel from further away, and so you just come into contact with that many more fish. You fish it above the fish or below the fish, make these fish chase it, and you have a tendency to catch the bigger fish in the school. And so that's the whole deal with this, is that, you know, there's only, you know, so many crappies that are over 12 inches in a lake like this. I feel like soft plastics just help you get them because you can sort through these smaller fish. These smaller fish aren't going to chase this stuff around as much, and so just a deadly system for catching some beautiful crappies.